Hello, hello. Welcome to the Penguin Review radio show. This is my last ever radio show for Penguin Review. My name is Tom, and with me today are Lexi.
Hi.
Mark.
Hi.
And Jordan.
Hello.
Inside joke. Anyhow, so since this is my last ever Penguin Review radio show, I find it fitting that we are going out on pretty much the nerdiest of nerdy notes that you can possibly go out on. Graphic novel adaptations. I'm excited.
Do you want to start the conversation then, since
Yes,
you're so excited?
I
Go
will.
ahead, take it away.
Okay, graphic novel adaptations. Last night we had a discussion about graphic novel adaptations going into Batman versus Superman. I won't bring that up because it brings up some hard feelings about my extreme hatred of Man of Steel and how Zack Snyder's a terrible director. But I'm gonna be good. Last day had to get that one shot in. Anyhow, take it away, Mark. Favorite graphic novel adaptation to a TV series or a movie, and why? Or comic book character. It can be a character adaptation, like a character.
Well, my personal favorite graphic novel adaptation would probably be, I don't know if anyone here has seen it, Scott Pilgrim versus the World.
Yes.
I'm a really, really huge fan of that movie. That movie did such a good job of kind of translating the really, comic booky. It almost felt like a live-action comic book, and I think that they made it really, vibrant and whatnot. It's one of those movies that I could just watch it over and over again. It's great.
Lexi, you said that you haven't read a lot of graphic novels, but you have watched superhero movies. What's your favorite superhero movie?
No.
Don't say Spider-Man, please.
I haven't seen the new ones, so I don't know anything about those.
We'll get back to you.
Okay.
I'll give you 5 minutes to think. Jordan.
Well, I was favorite graphic novel adaptation. Well, from graphic novel type thing to a movie or another medium like that, I don't know, I thought Watchmen was pretty decent, for translating most of the plot and stuff like that. But I also kind of want to talk about, since we're talking about graphic novel adaptations, word print novels being transferred to graphic novels, if any of you have had experience with that.
Yeah.
Because I know there was a fad. Actually, I don't know, it could still be going on, I'm not entirely sure, but especially in the young adult books, James Patterson did it for quite a few of his young adult series. He'd have the print book, and then he'd start doling out graphic novel ones. And personally, I kind of thought that it was just a cheap money grabbing trick because they were the same story or whatever. But I didn't know if you had any experience with any that you actually liked the fact that they did that, or what you think about the idea in general. Anybody?
It's kind of weird because I've never really read any of those. The only example I can think of off the top of my head was, I think they took The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo and turned that into a graphic novel.
Yes.
I think I skimmed through that one. I don't know. I feel like if it can bring something new to the story, I could probably be okay with it. But if it's just going to be the same thing as the book, then I'm not sure how I feel about it. I don't know. I would have to read a few more to really get my feeling on that.
That makes a lot of sense. The one thing that I really noticed with that is it tends to happen a lot when a movie gets picked up.
Mm-hmm.
There's a book out, but there's also a movie or a TV show out. It happened with Game of Thrones, and what I thought was hilarious about the Game of Thrones graphic novel was it was the first Game of Thrones novel. And what I thought was so hilarious was they made all of the characters look like the characters from TV instead of their descriptions from the original book, and they called it a book-to-graphic novel adaptation. Yes, so Tyrion actually looks like Peter Dinklage's Tyrion.
Right.
And that was interesting. I've read the first Dark Tower book that they brought out, The Gunslinger. Okay. They had a Stephen King adaptation into a graphic novel. That was pretty good. Also, there Stephen King has a bunch out. Apparently, there's a Talisman one out, and the Talisman's my favorite Stephen King novel, so
So you're gonna be picking that up?
really want to read it. I probably won't buy it because the last one, the Dark Tower one, was pretty good, but I don't think it was purchase worthy.
Mm.
And I think that a lot of these things, they're TV tie-ins, they're movie tie-ins now, young adult novel tie-ins, and I think that it is a cheap cash grab, and I don't think that that's a good thing or a good place for comic books or graphic adaptations to go.
Right. I think, and I'm actually not real knowledgeable of this. One of my favorite series is the Dresden Files series by Jim Butcher, and I've seen that he has like a comic book line that also follows the Dresden Files. But I want to say that at least most of the comic book ones are like original stories. And that I'm like actually really kind of excited when I have, the money to obtain some of those or whatever. I plan on doing so because I really like the character and the world that it is. But if it was just the same stories exactly as like the novels, I probably wouldn't pick up more than one because I've already seen the story. I'd like to see it drawn, definitely, because I think that has an aspect that it can really add because you can describe a character with words, but then your audience like pictures it a different way, and sometimes action scenes or whatever are just like better if they're actually visual, which is why those scenes are the ones that are always played out more when they get turned into like movies and TV shows because they're a visual aspect. So the graphic novel kind of merges the visual and like the words and everything, and so that'd be cool, but it just kind of, if it's exactly the same as the book that you'd already published, I feel like even though it's cool to see it like laid out, it's still kind of, it's nothing new. It's not as intriguing to get me into it.
I think Joss Whedon actually did a good job with that when he brought out the Buffy the Vampire Slayer Season 9 comic book.
Oh, yeah, I heard about that.
And it's just a continuation of the series.
Right.
And I thought that was really cool. So in that case, it was okay for everybody to look just like they looked in the TV show because it's the TV series just brought down to comic form. But I think it comes down to cash grab, and that's a very disappointing thing for any industry to just be brought down to cash grab. Yeah. I know that there's a 50 Shades of Grey graphic novel. I have not read it yet.
Oh, God.
Yeah, but
I shouldn't be surprised.
One day. Oh, Lord, 50 Shades. And there had to be another shot at that, too. So... Did you think of what your favorite comic book character is?
Probably X-Men.
X-Men?
Yeah.
Which X-Men? Which movie?
It's from a while ago. I know Halle Berry was Storm in it. I just can't remember when it was. I watched it a long time ago, and I think it's just because the cartoon was on when I was little, too, and I watched that, so I just kind of grew up with it.
Okay, cool.
No, I never read it.
I had a thought, and I lost it.
You had a thought and you lost it?
Yep.
Did Harry Dresden in the Dresden Files comic look like Harry Dresden did in the TV show? Dresden Files?
I haven't seen the comic, so I can't quote. Okay. I can't tell you on that. I could probably look it up, but I don't think so. I think the cover artwork, which is all I've seen of the comic, is actually how the cover matches like the cover artwork of the books. So it would look more like that art, I would assume.
I know that Tony Stark looks just like Robert Downey Jr.'s Tony Stark in every single Iron Man comic made in the last 10 years.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
It is pretty awesome. None of the other characters do, but Tony Stark looks just like Robert Downey Jr., who in actuality is Tony Stark.
So, anything else about graphic novel adaptations?
Maybe not about the adaptations, but what about the literary value of graphic novels? Mm-hmm. I know that Watchmen, and this has been brought up on the show before too, Watchmen was on Time Magazine's 100 Greatest Novels list. That's novels. Not graphic novels,
right.
Novels list. It was up there with Gone with the Wind was in there, Catcher in the Rye, To Kill a Mockingbird. I think it was ranked 89th, but the reason that it was ranked so high is because when it was written, it was one of the best satires. It's still one of the best examples of satire in any form that I can think of. Probably up there with South Park and Monty Python. But I just think that it was absolutely fascinating that Time magazine in the 1980s saw Watchmen as being a great novel, not just a great graphic novel. And today, there are still people that just say, oh, that's a comic book.
Yeah. But, I mean, there are stories being told. I mean, there are also, I don't understand the argument. People are like, oh, it's just a comic book. Oh, it's just like a graphic novel or manga or anything. They're like, and they kind of downgrade. I'm like, but there's still stories being told. And everything. It's just the same things happening in a novel.
So do they hold literary value?
I think so. I mean, of course, there are like the different kinds of each. Like there are some books that you read or whatever that wouldn't necessarily be taught in like a literature course, and that's fine. There are also some graphic novels and comic books that wouldn't necessarily be taught in a literature course, but there are ones that could be too, based on how they're written, the topics that they deal with, how they're put together.
Yeah, I agree. I think graphic novels do have literary value, and comic books as well, absolutely. I think it's interesting that Time magazine picked Watchmen, because it's the only one on there, and I'm curious that if they do another list, 10, 15 years down the line from here, if any other graphic novels show up on that list. But I think within maybe the past 30 years or so, I think they have gained respect in a way. So yeah, I think people are kind of waking up to the idea that.
Because aren't there, my roommate took, I think, a young adult literature class. I'm not entirely sure, but they read Persepolis. Yeah, and that's a graphic novel.
Yeah, Persepolis is so good. If you have not read it, read it now. I would teach Persepolis in a lit course if I could, if it fit other things that I was teaching. Just like Mouse.
Yeah,
Mouse
that was
is absolutely brilliant. Mouse tells the story of Auschwitz camp, and it uses cats as Nazis and mice as Jews, and it gets the point across really, really well, especially with the medium. It is an extraordinarily touching novel, or graphic novel. It hits on all kinds of things between the father and the son relationship, and just the extreme atrocities of war. And I think that I could teach that right along with Diary of Anne Frank.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, Lexi,
Yes.
you don't read comic books.
I do not. But
what would you think if a professor handed you a syllabus that had a graphic novel or a comic book on it? What would be the first thought that ran through your head? Honest thought. Before you just heard all of our answers.
I probably would have been confused if it was a comic book, but I've read two graphic novels in my last two literature classes.
Okay, what'd you read?
Fun Home and American Born Chinese.
Okay.
I've read those.
Fun Home by Alison Bechtel.
Bechtel, yeah.
I know somebody named Abby Bechtel too. By Alison Bechtel. I read that for the first time in a creative nonfiction course this semester, and I found it absolutely fascinating. We dissected the way that she wrote it, because the way that she wrote it, since it's creative nonfiction, the writing your life and then putting it to pictures is a bit different than writing fiction and putting it to pictures. Because she had to figure out exactly what everybody looked like. It's fantastic, and that can be dissected because we questioned whether or not she had Asperger's and all kinds of things. It was just very interesting, a very interesting look at a father-daughter relationship, and eventually a mother-daughter relationship.
I found it interesting. When she was drawing that book, she would take old photographs and recreate them using herself, and she would use that as kind of the basis for drawing the panels. I thought that was a pretty interesting approach to it. But yeah, I think it gets a point that I think it does really well to sort of I don't know how to describe it. It just does a really good job of getting a point across and whatnot. It's very good.
I spaced out. I'm sorry. It's been a long week.
Yeah. So, given all of those different things, all of those different aspects, how would you teach a graphic novel if you had to teach it?
I can't answer that question.
All right.
Would it be any different than teaching like a novel without pictures?
I don't think so.
That's what I wanted to get at.
Okay.
I
Thank
would
you
probably teach
so
it just
much.
like any other, regular novel.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's why I see a lot of literary value in graphic novels. I think that there are good ones and I think there are bad ones. Just like there are good books and there are bad books. Books that you can teach, books that you shouldn't teach. And I think that anytime that you find something that does have literary value, you can find a way, some way to teach it in a class if it fits with that class. And just because the word graphic comes before the word novel, and it has pictures to go along with the words, there's no reason that you cannot teach it.
Yeah. Although it would probably bring in some interesting things too, the different aspects that you would focus on specifically because it is a graphic novel, like how the specifics of you could with themes and motifs, you could actually look at them like color schemes, the art style, sound effect bubbles and things like that too, which would be kind of like an interesting discussion on how that adds to it as a regular text novel because there are the pictures.
Yeah, Mouse was hand drawn and is in black and white. I know Alison Bechdel's book Fun Home is in black and white. I haven't read her sequel.
I haven't either.
I haven't
read it.
But I know that it's in black and white, and that's a big question too. Why did they decide not to use color? Is it good for this reason or bad for that reason? I think a lot of hers was we talked about this. There's actually a line in Fun Home about how the colors on the pictures were washed out, and we wondered if that's why she didn't use the color. And in Mouse, it was just because the author, Art Spiegelman, was looking back at old pictures, and none of the pictures had color.
Right.
And at the time, there weren't really pictures with color unless somebody went in and colored them.
Right.
During World War II.
Yeah, I just think it adds a whole new dimension to it because you could just kind of pick apart why they decided to, draw it that way, what significance it has.
Yeah, because each of those are decisions,
Yeah.
just like when an author is just writing text on their decisions of themes, motif, like this metaphor, this reoccurring symbol or whatever. It's the same thing with the graphic novels, just those are actually things that you see.
Okay, I think on that note, since it's 12:21, we're going to take a bit of a break. I will see you guys in about 5 minutes. Hello, and welcome back to the Penguin Review radio show. For the second half of the show, we're still geeking out. We're going to be talking about the literary value in video games. Is there literary value in video games? Yes, no. If no, why not? I'll argue you. So, let's go. I can talk all about this, but I'm going to let you guys talk all about this first. Jordan.
Oh, you're not going to lead us? Okay, I mean, I think I could probably see the argument that some video games, I'm not going to say video games as a whole, but some video games could have literary value, especially kind of the RPG genre of them, because those are very much story-based. As you go through and you're dealing with unique characters, the one that I've played the most so far is the Dragon Age series, and some of those your companions that you travel along with have such deep and rich backstories, they have real depth or whatever as characters. They're not just some sword wielding elf that follows you around to decapitate people. Actually there's a story to them. You can have interactions with them. and everything, just like you would if you were like reading a novel or whatever, and you kind of get like attached to them because like you hear their backstories, and if they've had like a really crappy like childhood and everything, you're like, oh, I just want to give you a hug, I'm so sorry, because you actually care about them, or at least I did anyway. I got really attached to like all of them. So.
And then you level that person up, and then they die anyhow. So, Mark, yes, no, maybe so?
Yeah, sure. I keep hearing that The Last of Us is just like this really...
Oh, I've heard good things about that.
Yeah, I hear it's just like tremendous. I actually have a copy of it, but I haven't gone to playing it yet. I've heard a lot of things about that one, that it's just... In terms of storytelling, it just breaks new ground in video games. What example I have of a game that did something really different, like storytelling-wise? It was this game for the Xbox 360. It was an arcade game. It was called Limbo. Did anybody hear about that or play it?
No.
It's a hard game to describe. It's like this really like kind of gloomy, dark, and bleak atmosphere. You play as this little kid, and you just go through all these obstacles, but like it's told in like this really, it's kind of artistic. It's kind of a hard game to describe, but it's very good. That had a lot of symbolism and whatnot in it.
I'm not one for video games. The only two I would play is Mario Kart and Just Dance, and I don't think they have very value.
No, not really.
I tried to... No, sorry.
Yeah.
They're just fun.
Yeah, they're just fun. But that's another thing. When you get a game that's just fun that also has some literary value, it's great. My argument, before they did everything for you and before there was voice in the games, the Final Fantasy series, every single one of those games had a different story to it. Every single one of them involved reading. It wasn't all easy reading. There were things to comprehend. There was actually story. In one of them, in Final Fantasy VII, one of gaming's all-time favorite characters, I think, that she made the top 100, and she might have been number 8. This character, everybody always levels her up because she's the healer. And then right before the final fight, your healer, that's like level 90, dies. If she dies, there's nothing that you can do about it. She dies. So there was little 12-year-old me playing Final Fantasy VII thinking, oh, why? Why did this character just die? No, and almost being brought to tears. It's sad, but not being brought to tears because it's sad. Being brought to tears because my best character just died. So there's that. But I think that if anything that you have to read, you still have to read the Zelda games. You still have to read the Legend of Zelda games. Mm-hmm. Any Legend of Zelda games or any Final Fantasy games or anything like that, usually it's RPGs that get you to read, that get you to think, that maybe even get people writing fan fiction, because there are Legend of Zelda fan fictions, which we've talked about. That in turn, that has some sort of literary value. Can that be taught in the classroom? Only select classrooms.
Yeah.
Usually.
That would be really hard to pull off in like a traditional classroom.
Yeah, that's more for technical classes, computer animation and whatnot. But do I think that they hold literary value? Yes. Do I think that they're a good thing to get some people that hate reading? Yes, because you can turn to these people and you can say, so you don't like reading, but you like video games. Hey, guess what you're doing when you're playing Legend of Zelda? Or guess what you're doing when you're playing Fire Emblem? You're reading.
And then also, some of them, or at least the Dragon Age series, they've got 3 games out currently, all RPGs. But they also have like novel series that like tell you bits and pieces of like the history that takes place in between the 3 games. Because the 3 games in total, I think, spans like 10 years, I think, from the first game to the 3rd game. So there's like this big chunk of time that you don't really get to see. You hear about through like talking with characters and reading things in the game. And so you like know what happened more or less, but like details of other characters and things that happened like off screen, even in the games, they made novels out of. So they're adapting the game into a novel more or less with an original storyline to continue it on.
Mm-hmm.
Another really good example of reading in a video game. Has anyone here ever played the Phoenix Wright series?
Yeah.
Yeah, that.
Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney.
Oh yeah, those were like my favorite thing. Like I played through all those like multiple times, and even though it was always a very linear experience, it just created all these like, weird, unique characters, and I kept finding myself going back to them. We're on the topic of reading. I know somebody that learned to read because of Pokemon. Yeah,
Hey.
because like that entire game is reading.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Nintendo actually has warnings on the back of their DS games now for like Legend of Zelda and stuff that warning this game, or for this game you need at least an 8-year-old's reading level, I think is what Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask said.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it's good that they have that warning. I also think it's good that, hey, you're going to be reading, yay.
Yeah.
But there are certain games like Fire Emblem and some of the Final Fantasy games and Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney where you have to make decisions.
Yeah, Dragon Age is very heavily with that too.
Yeah, and you have to read. So you have to use a certain portion of your brain to make these decisions. So if it's reading and it's making you use a specific part of your brain to make these decisions.
Critical thinking skills.
Critical thinking skills. Unless you just go, oh, I'm going to push square, just push square.
Yeah, or flip a coin. I don't know. Yeah. But yeah, there's the critical thinking skills. That's a thing with I think it's BioWare in general, because I think it's also with their Mass Effect games, which are basically, they're similar in like gameplay style as Dragon Age, but they take place in space instead. And the fact that you like make decisions, and those decisions then influence the story. So like the people who wrote these games had to write like so many different like branches of outcomes, because it's like, well, if you choose this, then like these things happen, and then your characters react to that later and will mention it and things like that. So then you also then get like a personalized like gameplay to you and how you made your decisions, and then you can then just, which leads to kind of cool discussions when you talk to other people who have played the game because they've made different decisions than you, and you can kind of like critique and have like real in-depth conversations about like character and plot line and things like that, which is all things you do with when you're discussing novels too. So
if people keep talking to you once they found out the decisions that you made.
That's true.
Yeah, and there's also Walking Dead by Telltale Games, where you can decide whether or not people live and die. And that game can make you appear to be a pretty twisted human being if you're not careful. Not
I felt so
to me.
Empty at the end of that game. I haven't played Season 2 yet, but oh my god.
Yeah. Because
those are the first one was just so... It was devastating. Like, it was bad.
The Telltale games are all very much like story-driven, right? Like text... Almost kind of... I don't know. I haven't played them, but I heard that they're pretty much like story-driven type thing.
They're all story-driven. For the most part, they're well-written, aside from the Jurassic Park one, unfortunately.
There's a Jurassic Park one?
There's a Jurassic Park one.
I didn't know that.
It was such a failure that most people don't know about it. It was just so bad.
It's good that I don't know about it then.
It got like a 5 out of 10. For a Telltale game, it got 5 out of 10.
Yeah.
So... They have multiple different storylines, and you have different choices, and I think that it's really cool to be able to have those choices and to have different storylines based on that, especially when you consider that the first role-playing video games in the late 70s, I think, maybe, and early 80s involved typing in words, typing in your actions. Yeah. You move forward 5 blocks, fight the dragon with axe, that kind of thing, and you had to do the typing, you had to do the reading, and you had to imagine it, because some of these things just could not pop up on screen at that moment in time.
Yeah.
Yep.
So.
I find it very cool.
There was a book that came out a few months ago. It was about this guy who he like makes role-playing games for a living, and he mails out like like quest cards and whatnot to people, and like people mail what they've done back. It was really interesting. I think it was called Wolf and White Van.
Wolf in White Van?
Wolf and White Van. Yeah.
Wolf in White Van. Okay.
Yeah, I think like the author is like the lead singer. I think of like
Nickelback.
No, I would never read anything written by Chad Kroger. I think it was like the lead singer of like this band. I think they're called the Mountain Goats or something like that. I've never heard of them, but it was a really interesting book. It like incorporated the kind of role-playing thing into the story in a really interesting way. It's only like 200 pages. I read like the whole thing in one sitting, so it might be worth checking out.
Definitely. Is it a young adult novel?
Not really.
Just a novel?
Yeah, just a novel.
Just a novel.
Mm-hmm.
So, any more thoughts about video games as literature, Tom?
I think that as time goes on, and as more and more of these games, and this is going to make me sound like such a lit snob, as more and more of these games that used to have so many role-playing elements, one of those role-playing elements being reading, now those games are taking up voice actors so that they can sell to a different audience. I don't think that that's a good thing. I think that it takes away their literary value. I mean, if the story's still there, the story's still there, but I think that they're also taking away the fact that you actually have to read things on screen. You actually have to read some words, make some decisions using your mind, and not have everything done for you. Resident Evil, I'm looking at you. I think that you take away just a lot of key elements, a lot of the fun. Mm-hmm. You take away a lot of the fun, but then again, some people argue that reading is not fun, so why would they want to play a video game where you have to read?
I mean, I like the voice acting because it brings the characters to life, but I always have the subtitles on because I don't necessarily retain it as well when they are speaking as to when I'm reading it with them speaking.
Oh, definitely. That's definitely a thing. I think that you retain things a lot more. You retain video games a lot more, too, when you have subtitles on and you're actually reading things. Mm-hmm. Because a video game can be one of your favorite video games. Later on, somebody will ask you, oh, what was that about? Who were the characters? It was about this cowboy. What was his name?
Good, I don't remember.
Maybe. I don't know. Roland?
So... Anything else? Or just sitting here? I
really don't have anything else. I did forget one thing, though. I forgot to do the lead-in when we came in.
Oh, the live read.
The live read. And tonight's live read, once again, going out, best ending live read ever, Arrow. Arrow's episode for the night is called Azahim. Oliver undergoes a significant transformation. The League of Assassins goes after Nyssa, who is mentoring Laurel, but she becomes aware of their plot. Sounds like a good episode. That's on tonight, only at 8 o'clock, and only on the CW.
And then also tomorrow, right? Tomorrow is Thursday? Tomorrow is the release party for the 2015 issue of Penguin Review. Woohoo! Woo! There's a picture on our Facebook page of the cover. It's a pretty sweet-looking book, if I do say so myself, and you should all stop by and pick up a copy. There will be food, good food, lots of food, because we were able to provide lots of good food this time.
We had so much Chartwell's money that we sat thinking, okay, what else can we get, guys?
Yep, we spent it all.
Yes.
All for you, listeners.
So this is all for you. You need to come to the show, come to the launch, and enjoy yourself. And you'll get to hear a delightful speech by Jordan McNeil.
And Tom Pugh.
And it's going to be fun. It's going to be a good time, and everybody's going to enjoy themselves. I know Lexi's going to be reading. Mark is...
I'm going to be reading, so now you have no excuse to not be there.
Yeah.
Absolutely have to show up. Anyhow, this was my last show, and I'd like to thank you very much. I don't know if it's Jordan's last show. We'll see if she
I don't
comes
know.
on next year.
We'll see.
Know.
That's too far in advance. One day at a time.
One day at a time. Okay. But I know it's my last show, so I'd like to thank you very much for being constant listeners. All right? Bye. Oh, this is Tom Pugh saying goodbye.
And
Bye.
Lexi,
Bye.
see you tomorrow.
All right. Thank you, everybody. In that order, that was Lexi, Mark, and Jordan. Peace.